Okay, well, I have been asked a number of times to spell out in a video what I've been sharing at various places where I've been speaking on the message of Fatima, in particular as it applies to all of these celestial happenings that are going on that are in some areas are given more attention than others. And so what I wanted to do for those who have asked, and maybe for those who are interested in learning a kind of a Catholic angle of this for your own discernment, I thought I'd do it and use a whiteboard behind me. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about all of the things that are going on, especially in light of the total solar eclipse on August 21st. And one of the great things that God asks us to do is to use our senses, open our eyes, open our ears, and like Jesus said, also be aware of the signs of the times. This goes all the way back to the very beginning when we're looking at the book of Genesis, in the very first creation account. When God created the heavens, what did it say? It said in verse 14, I believe it is. It said, the earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kinds. Okay, it goes on. Yes, verse 14. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Let them be for signs and for seasons. Well, that's what we're here to talk about, the signs of our own times, in particular the ones going on in the heavens, you can say. We're rapidly approaching October 13th, which will be the 100th anniversary of the great miracle of the sun that took place in Fatima. And so in light of all this, I want to try to break it down for you, some things that should be for our own reflection. Because as you can see, the big question is the United States experiencing a kind of a sign of Jonah moment? And when I say that, we go back to Jesus, and he says, an evil generation seeks a sign, but no sign will be given to it except for the sign of Jonah. Now, of course, we know that the ultimate sign of Jonah was Jesus, who died and then for 3 days was in the tomb and then rose again. You could say that prefigurement of the story of Jonah being in the belly of a whale. But what's interesting with modern science is that they have been able to go back and look at the heavens at almost any time in history that we have, and they realized that there was also another sign taking place. When Jonah went to the Ninevites and said 40 days more and Nineveh will be destroyed or will be overcome, something took place. And they call it, it's a famous, I don't know how you pronounce it exactly, but the Bur-Sagal, I'll say, Bur-Sagal total solar eclipse that would have been taking place at that time when Jonah's warning the Ninevites. Which would make sense because who is he for these Ninevites who weren't part of God's people to believe in him? Some guy comes in and says 40 days more and God's going to destroy you. Well, imagine if that happened today. Just anybody kind of coming off the streets, he would be kind of laughed at. Very few probably would ever take the person seriously. Well, when a sign like that, a total solar eclipse takes place, especially when we look at the times before all of modern science, everything had great significance. Everything had great significance. Every sign in the heavens, had meaning to them. So when this happened, it made people pause. So a total solar eclipse happening when Jonah's saying this, you guys need to get your lives in order, and you got 40 days to do it. Well, this is something for us to really take to heart. So anyway, sign of Jonah, not just a spiritual sign later on that Jesus fulfills, but a sign that took place with a total solar eclipse, followed by a 40-day period of penance. The Ninevites listened, and they were spared. They received God's mercy. Well, here we are, 2017, and we just had a total solar eclipse take place on August 21st, 2017. Why is that so significant? Why should that stand out to us? Well, going back to the time of the sign of Jonah, the total solar eclipse may have marked that period of penance. Well, is there a connection between that and today? Well, I like this posit that there is some kind of connection, I would think, in light of the lineup of events that are coinciding with that total solar eclipse. I want to go through a timeline, though, to kind of put things in a chronology and see if we can put some interesting pieces together. First off, 1879, August 21st, 1879. Let me get my pen here. August 21st, the feast of Our Lady of Knock, when she appeared with St. John the Evangelist, St. Joseph, and with the depiction of the lamb over the altar, and representing the scene right out of the book of Revelation. A book of Revelation that has the original name of the Apocalypse, book of the Apocalypse. The book of Apocalypse simply means an unveiling, apocalypsis. And this apocalyptic, you could say, revelation taking place, private revelation, and Knock, coming at a time where it's like kind of a kickoff of an extraordinary time in history. Now you had in 1830, you had Mary appearing in Paris, France. Then again in 1846, she appears in La Salette, France. 1858 in Lourdes, France. And then we come to 1879, and we have this vision that takes place in Ireland. And then we also have later on, within about 10 years, Pope Leo XIII has a vision of Satan getting a special period of power that God would give him. He asked for it. God gave it to him. Satan said, I can destroy the church if you give me power in an extended time. And in this vision, it was granted to him. From that came the prayer of St. Michael the Archangel, making a connection between Satan being ultimately dominated by St. Michael as being an angel that would be used by God to kind of maybe chain Satan down. And so that was, I think it was 1888, perhaps, I don't remember exactly, it was in the 1880s. We also have the beginning of that modern era. Technology explodes really from that point onward. And we also have a parallel of a rise in technology, and then we also have a rise in godlessness. Secularism is on the rise. One of the big things that the church is aware of. Well, here we are. We go into the 20th century. In 1914, on August 21st, interesting enough, 1914, we have a total solar eclipse takes place. And this is the time that began World War I. Is there a connection there between Our Lady of Knock and this apocalyptic vision, perhaps heralding this apocalyptic age of an unveiling taking place, the end of an era? Well, it's very interesting that a total solar eclipse that took place on August 21st, 1914, was seen in its totality over ancient Nineveh, which is not modern-day Mosul, Iraq, and it was also seen over Eastern Europe, where World War I began. God speaking to the world, saying that it, in a certain sense, a judgment is coming upon the sins of humanity that play out through wars like this. Well, very interesting. We have the total solar eclipse that takes place, and then in the midst of World War I, we have this event that takes place in Fatima, 1917, where Our Lady appears to 3 children. And at this point, too, the United States just entered World War I. And so, in the U.S. entering World War I, and the Blessed Mother tells the children at one point that mankind needs to convert, it needs to return and have penance. And if it does not do so, then a worse war was going to be coming. Her exact words were this. She said, the war is going to end, referring to World War I, but if people do not cease offending God, a worse one will break out during the pontificate of Pius XI. When you see a night illumined by an unknown light, know that this is the great sign given you by God that he is about to punish the world for its crimes, by means of war, famine, and persecutions of the Church and of the Holy Father. Well, humanity didn't heed that, and what happened was exactly that. In 1938, and it was January, early February, where Hitler takes upon himself the supreme command of the German army after being elected. And then in March of that year, they invaded Austria. What's very interesting is that in 1938, in January, at the very end of that, was this aurora borealis that took place. It was, let me get the exact date, January 25th of 1938, this aurora borealis effect took place that most of Europe was able to easily see. And when the visionary of Fatima was asked about that, she said that was the sign that Our Lady had promised from the heavens that would mark the beginning of World War II. And the aurora borealis is caused primarily from the coronal mass ejection of solar flares that eventually reached the Earth in a high magnetic storm. And this one was very unusual, and it was the one that was very unique, and it marked that period of time. What's interesting is that when you look at the solar events that took place, of course, we had the total solar eclipse of 1914. In 1917, this was the peak of that current solar cycle, and I'm trying to get the exact cycle 15, and it peaked right at this time, around August of 1917. What's interesting is that in 1917, October 13th of that, was the great miracle of the sun, where Our Lady shows basically the power that God has given her, and how that, you could say, Mary using the sun as like a plaything, and that miracle, the way it was basically taken out of its place in the heavens, and she just made it her toy, as Fulton Sheen would say, and she used that to mark a time for conversion for people, and the people there saw the promise of Our Lady fulfilled. He said that God will show a miracle through her to show that what she was saying was real, that she did appear. And so we have a heightened solar peak at this time of that cycle. Same thing in 1938. That was also a time of when the cycle 17 of the solar cycle, when that one peaked, right at the time of the aurora borealis. The point that I'm making here is that we see throughout history that these things that happen are connected, even in a broader sense. And people say, well, look, we can trace it back to the sun. What's very interesting, which is very true, we can, is that when this phenomena of the sun happens, it coincides with these pivotal moments in history. And so with that solar 17 cycle, 1938, and then that triggering that aurora borealis, really interesting once again, these signs in the heavens that we have. Well, when we fast forward now to 2017, when we are 100 years away from the revelations of Fatima, we come to the point where it was 99 years ago was the last time a total solar eclipse was seen all throughout the United States. Isn't that interesting? Well, that was at the time, not only in the midst of World War I, it was right at the time when the United States was discerning whether or not to get involved. And then it did get involved right at that time. So was that an ominous sign of what was going to be happening, and how the U.S. now is being brought into this global war picture? And so here we are 100 years out, and on August 21st of 2017, just a few weeks ago, we had a total solar eclipse take place. And the only place in the world where that totality was seen was over the continental United States, from Washington State all the way down from West Coast to East Coast to South Carolina. unlike the total solar eclipse that took place in 1914, which was seen over ancient Nineveh and Eastern Europe, this time it was only over the United States. Is that pointing to the fact that perhaps this is the United States' Nineveh moment? Well, what's very interesting is that we know in the original historical account of Nineveh, that total solar eclipse that took place with Jonah marked 40 days of penance, upon which God would then judge whether or not they had turned to him sufficiently, and he would spare them what was promised. Well, August 21st kicked off a penitential season within the church, which has traditionally been known as St. Michael's Lent. And that period of time goes all the way until the Feast of the Archangels, which is September 29th. So August 21st literally kicks off a 40-day period of penance for the Catholic Church. What's also interesting is that this year it also coincides with a 40-day period of penance within the Jewish calendar, which ends on the Feast of Atonement, Yom Kippur, also on September 29th. Is there a connection between this total solar eclipse being like a sign of Jonah for today, where we have two periods of penance? I think there's something to that. It was also at this time of August 21st when Hurricane Harvey came out, literally of nowhere, as all the meteorologists were saying. If you watch the news, they would say, this storm came out of nowhere, and it was massive, and then it became the greatest hurricane that ever hit the state of Texas, one of the greatest ones that ever hit the United States. Certainly when it came to the rainfall, it's unprecedented in our recorded history of America. And then on the heels of that, now they're saying there's one which is even stronger, which they were saying would be a category 6, which doesn't technically exist. And the winds being over 185 miles per hour, being sustained for a while, and now it's on a direct course to hitting Florida. It'll hit it by this time tomorrow. It'll be right in the thick of it. And so that's Hurricane Irma. And then there's another hurricane that was also hitting, that hasn't been given much attention, Mexico, also in the Gulf. And there's another hurricane that's coming behind Hurricane Irma, and that's Hurricane Jose. All of these kinds of phenomenon, which is all really is having its triggering or ordering, to say, right at this time of August 21st. And what's also interesting is that we've had a very quiet solar cycle. And what are we? We are in the, what cycle now? We are in the cycle 24. It's been very quiet. And then all of a sudden, this was just the other day, on September 6th, there was an enormous coronal mass ejection that they say was the greatest of the entire cycle, was just launched out. And it's now just hitting the world right now, which began yesterday, on September 8th, which is the nativity of our Blessed Mother, the birthday of our Blessed Mother. And so now we have this increased solar activity that's going on. So you can see, this is very interesting, the Feast of Our Lady of Knock of 1879 coincides with the total solar eclipse on 1914, beginning of World War I. And then here we are, Feast of Our Lady of Knock 2017. We're also at the point where the greatest amount of war drums are taking place with North Korea, and we've never been closer to another all-out war as we are at this very moment. And so even to the point where we have a National Day of Prayer, not just for the hurricane victims, but we're praying for everybody in the world. And so here we are, putting these things together, and it should make us pause and ask, what is God saying to us? Is he really, in his mercy, is he giving us indications of where we're at and what we should be doing? I think these two penitential seasons that coincide exactly with the total solar eclipse on Our Lady of Knock, on this apocalyptic announcement of this, what St. John Paul II called the final confrontation, which we are now entering. We are in the midst of this. He said this in 1976 to the United States. Fulton Sheen said in 1948 that we are now entering into the apocalypse. He said the end of an era. So we're kind of coming to an end, and as this Latin saying goes, things quicken at the end, and we're experiencing a quickening right now of a lot of things. And so the point is that, hey, are we listening? What are we doing about this? Are we repenting? That's at the heart of the message of Fatima. On the July 13th message, the one that spoke of a second world war that would be coming if people didn't change, it was an angel pointing to earth and saying, penance, penance, penance. And it was only our Blessed Mother who was in the way that kept the divine justice from coming upon the earth for the crimes of humanity. And since World War II, we've had, unimaginable more violence and sin and evil in the world. 1.4 billion babies alone of abortion have been aborted. Babies have been aborted through abortion. 1.4 billion. Of course, we've had over 270 million people who have died from death from the state, what they call democide. A study out of the University of Hawaii. So this is very serious that we're talking about. And is there hope in the midst of this? Well, the hope is this, that despite what all of this is pointing to, which should make us pause, there's enough there that, you can't make this up. On September 23rd, something very special is going to be taking place. And this began in 2016, November 20th. 2016 was the Feast of Christ the King. It was the end of a year of mercy, and now it was preparing everyone for the 100th anniversary of Fatima. This year, a jubilee of mercy. On that day, the constellation Virgo had something significant happen to it. The planet Jupiter, I'm going to do it over here. I don't know exactly what the constellation looks like, but there's a part here, like the body. Inside, at November 20th, the planet Jupiter goes inside the constellation Virgo. Jupiter being the king of the planets, Virgo meaning virgin. You can see the imagery that we Christians, especially we Catholics, would see. Virgo representing our Blessed Mother, Jupiter representing Christ, you can say, in the womb. And for 9.5 months, Jupiter will remain inside the womb of the constellation Virgo. 9.5 months after, which is the time of a late-term pregnancy, Jupiter will exit the constellation Virgo and the womb there. The day that happens, the sun will rise, and Jupiter will be outside the womb. The sun will be behind the constellation Virgo, and the moon will be at the feet of Virgo. So you'll have the Virgo, the Virgin, with the sun. You could say Ho with the sun around her. And the moon will be under her feet. And at that time, too, there will be clearly 12, what will look like bright stars, at the point of her head. 9 of those will be regular stars from the constellation Leo, the lion. And then 3 of those will be 3 planets of Mercury, Venus, and Mars. So what we will have is a depiction in the heavens of the sign that says in Revelation 12, and a great sign appeared in the heavens, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and above her head a crown of 12 stars. Here we are. This will take place September 23rd, right before the final apparition anniversary of October 13th, where Our Lady revealed herself as Our Lady of the Rosary, which means a crown of roses, and also where the miracle of the sun, where this woman clothed with the sun literally shows her power over the cosmos. So in the midst of all of these signs and things that are happening, we have great hope to know that Our Lady has been sent to us as a great message of hope. But we also are being warned, as were the Ninevites, as was the world in previous times, but especially now, that this total solar eclipse of August 21st on the Feast of Our Lady of Knock launched 2 significant seasons of penance. I give you the lights in the sky to mark signs and seasons. And so the message of Fatima was penance. The message of Lord France in 1858, what did Our Lady say? Penance, penance, penance. Okay? It doesn't change. So I put this before you to take to prayer and to send and spread to whoever you wish. If there's anything that's faulty in my presentation, well, I apologize for that. Doing the best I can as a theologian and one who's trying to be aware of the signs of the times, as Jesus commanded us to. But For those who have asked me, I hope that this helps bring things out for you. You can go back and play it, spread it. I encourage you also then to just keep in touch and follow what we're doing with heroicfamilies.com. And make sure you sign up with our newsletter, but more importantly, even our texting feature that keeps people abreast of things. As the times get more serious, which is hard to imagine, but they will. Everything's literally pointing to that. The message of the family is at the heart of everything. As St. John Paul II says, as the family goes, so goes the nation and the world in which we live. If the world's on the brink of World War III, we've got to get our families right, first and foremost, so that we can begin to rebuild the civilization that Our Lady has promised at Fatima, that in the end, her Immaculate Heart will triumph. But that triumph isn't going to take place until it happens in the heart of every single person, every single family, every single parish, every single nation. So that's our goal. That's what we can be doing about this right now, is what Our Lady said at Fatima. She talked about how do you bring an end to war? She said, pray the rosary for peace and an end to the war. And later on she said the same thing. She said, because only she can obtain it. So Mary is God's merciful instrument of peace. Isn't it interesting how a year of mercy that we just had goes right into the year of Fatima? Mercy, Mary. Mercy, Fatima. Two sides of one coin. So let's leave with a sense of urgency, but a sense of hope. But more importantly, I think a sense of, right now, let's begin having a true spirit of penance. And one of the things that we can begin to do right now is pray the rosary every day as a family in our homes. And like the angel said in 1916 to the children of Fatima, we need to adore the Lord and beg for those pardon for those who do not adore the Lord, who do not believe, who do not love Him, and those who do not hope in Him. So the answer is right there. So I thank you for your time. Once again, heroicfamilies.com. If you want to bring this message or messages about it, of Our Lady of Fatima, to your parish or event or conference, reach out and we'll see what can be done about that. So God bless you. Let's pray for each other, and let's also be bold. Let's be bold prophets at a time where that prophetic voice is necessary. But then to point out the blueprint of Fatima, that's the answer. So thanks for chiming in. God bless y'all.